morning and thank you for joining us. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Friday, April 17th. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Shin Se-min. Before we get to it, these are the stories topping the hour. The reality of COVID-19's impact on jobs. South Korea's employment figures for March saw the biggest job losses since May of 2009. The employment rate for young Koreans also fell by almost 1% to hit the lowest level for March in 7 years. Trump issues new federal guidelines to open up parts of the U.S., ramping up pressures on governors to loosen their measures imposed to slow the spread of the virus. This as the country erased decades of gains in jobs. Plus, G7 leaders agree on the need for the rapid development of a vaccine for the coronavirus. Their evaluation of the WHO, however, not so much on the same page. Our top story this morning, a clearer picture is emerging of the economic fallout hitting South Korea as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. And that results through South Korea's latest job report this Friday. It shows the outbreak has had a devastating effect on the local employment market. This even prior to the outbreak, as the employment prospects were looking grim here in the nation. But the pandemic has twisted the knife on an already painful situation. For more on this, we have our Kim Jae-hee on the line for us. So Jae-hee, it was not unexpected move at all, but certainly a bad news. Tell us more.
Semin, South Korea saw the biggest decline in the number of jobs last month in almost 11 years. March's fall was largely attributed to the global coronavirus outbreak, which has already caused immense damage to the world economy. According to Statistics Korea on Friday, the number of employed people in South Korea in March fell to some 26.6 million. That's down around 195,000 compared to the same month last year, marking the largest on-year fall since May 2009. The employment rate for those aged between 15 to 64 was at 65.4%, down 0.8 percentage points compared to last year. The employment rate for those aged between 15 and 29 also fell. It was 41%, down 1.9 percentage points. But the elderly, 65 and older, saw an increase of 0.9 percentage points to 32.8%. Despite the fall in the number of jobs, the unemployment rate actually decreased 0.1 percentage points on year in March to 4.2%. This means the fallout is taking a toll on all corners of the economy, not just on trade and business front. Following the release of the Statistics Korea report, South Korea's finance chief Hong Nam-gi said this morning that the government is working on a package of measures to reinvigorate the nation's job market at this difficult time. That is all I have at this hour, but I'll be back with more updates in our later newscast. Back to you, Semin.
Thank you, our Kim Jae-hee, for those updates on Korea's job market. The international community is still suffering massive economic fallout due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The International Monetary Fund projects that the global economy will shrink sharply this year as a result. But according to the IMF's assessment, South Korea will contract the least from G20. Kim Bo-kyung with more.
The International Monetary Fund is projecting that G20 nations will see negative growth of minus 2.8% this year due to the COVID-19 outbreak. The IMF's G20 Surveillance Note's latest projection, released on Thursday, is a 6.2 percentage point drop from its previous forecast in January. It also slashed South Korea's economic outlook to minus 1.2%, a 3.4 percentage point drop from its previous projection. Yet, it was the smallest cut among the major 20 countries, showing a less severe impact on the South Korean economy, while advanced economies such as the U.S., Japan, and Germany are forecast to contract on average of 6%. To mitigate the global economic fallout, the IMF said some 50 countries will receive help by the end of the month, with over 100 countries asking for help. To support the poorest members, 5 developed countries, including Japan, France, and Canada, have promised around $11.7 billion upon the IMF's urgent request.
We have been able to strengthen our concessional capacity. We've got 70% of our ask met by commitments of the members. And I want to thank wholeheartedly Japan, the UK, France, Australia, and Canada for making firm commitments totaling $11.7 billion.
Saying such an outcome in record short time was possible due to the spirit of global solidarity, the IMF chief added the agency is committed to help countries that are burdened by debt so they can tackle the crisis effectively. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
As COVID-19 keeps the U.S. economy shut down, 5 million people made jobless claims in the last week alone. The crisis has wiped out all the jobs created since the Great Recession in the span of just 1 month. And following the need to get businesses open again, the Trump administration has come up with new guidelines to restart this frozen economy. Our Choi Won-jung with more.
U.S. President Trump has outlined a three-phase set of guidelines to gradually restart the economy. At a coronavirus task force briefing at the White House on Thursday local time, Trump announced plans to allow a phased reopening of closed businesses with strict guidelines.
Our country has suffered. The world has suffered. 184 other countries have suffered. Therefore, my administration is issuing new federal guidelines that will allow governors to take a phased and deliberate approach to reopening their individual states.
In a three-phase approach, people are recommended to avoid socializing, public gatherings, visit to senior care facilities, and visit to hospitals. Large venues, movie theaters, and restaurants are allowed to reopen under certain conditions, while schools and daycare centers will remain closed. Meanwhile, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo expressed his hesitancy to lift the state lockdown. He asked people to stay home by extending his statewide shutdown until May 15. As of Thursday, the U.S. surpassed 650,000 cases of COVID-19 with more than 32,000 deaths. Choi Won-jung, Arirang News.
Around the world, over 2 million people have been infected by the coronavirus. And this grim milestone comes just 10 days since the number reached a market number of 1 million. Now, there are concerns that countries like India and Brazil, where the lack of medical care is a serious issue, will spark a fresh new surge in the numbers. Our Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
As the world fights to contain COVID-19, many countries are enforcing strict lockdowns on their populations. This includes India, which has implemented some of the toughest lockdowns, forcing people out of work and off the streets. As the Indian government issued an extension to the nationwide lockdown, a massive protest erupted in Mumbai, as many of the nation's poor are desperate to resume work. However, many experts say without the strict lockdown, the country, which lacks proper medical facilities, would have seen a massive uptick in cases and deaths. Brazil has seen the most confirmed cases in South America, with more than 28,000 infections and the death toll approaching 2,000. 2 Brazilian state governors have tested positive, sparking panic in South America's most populous country. Despite having tested just 60,000 patients, 720,000 testing kits have arrived from South Korea, and more testing is expected. With infections continuing to tick up, many countries have decided to extend their quarantine measures. Mexico is extending its social distancing measures for another month to the end of May, predicting that the pandemic will peak in Mexico in about 3 weeks. The UK is extending its nationwide lockdown for at least another 3 weeks, as stand-in leader Dominic Raab said on Thursday that relaxing any of the current measures would risk both public health and the economy. However, some countries have decided to gradually lift lockdown measures to kickstart their respective economies. This includes Poland, which will slowly lift its measures, starting with restrictions on shops as it prepares to hold its presidential election by post on May 10th. Switzerland's Health Minister Alain Berset is set to outline a 3-stage plan to start a gradual opening of businesses and schools, which have now been shut for a month. While some nations start easing lockdowns, other parts of the world are seeing a surge in infections, leaving researchers scrambling for a vaccine. 이승재, Arirang News.
Staying with that story, over in Japan, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe reportedly decided to place the entire country of that country under a state of emergency to curb the spread of COVID-19 as the number of confirmed cases there tops 9,000. The country first implemented such measures on April 7th on Tokyo and 6 other prefectures. Multiple local media outlets reported Thursday the declaration allows governors to call for schools and businesses to close until early May, but stated that it is not a lockdown. The declaration also approves the spending of state budget to help citizens and businesses weather the economic fallout from the coronavirus crisis. The leaders of G7 countries have vowed to come together to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic. According to their readout from their virtual summit on Thursday, they agreed on the critical need for the rapid development and production of COVID-19 treatments and a vaccine. A different tone in regarding the WHO, though. While the G7 leaders mostly voiced their backing for the WHO and urged international cooperation, the U.S. still is in high-stakes tussle with the agency. The White House says U.S. allies are also reconsidering their monetary support for the organization. And the White House readout also reads that the leaders called for a thorough review of reform process, with much of their discussion having centered on the WHO's lack of transparency and chronic mismanagement of the pandemic. South Korea's central bank has rolled out an unprecedented loan scheme for local banks, brokerages, and insurance companies, aiming to cushion the local market that has been rocked by the COVID-19 pandemic. The loans, worth some $8.1 billion will be available starting May 4th. Our Kim Hyo-sun reports.
The Bank of Korea is launching a special loan program for the country's banks, insurance companies, and brokerages to ease liquidity issues amid the coronavirus pandemic. It explained Thursday that the loans will be worth some $8.1 billion and will be available from May 4th, with a borrowing period of 6 months. It added the special loans will be provided against collateral, which includes AA- rated corporate bonds at a rate of 85 basis points above that of 182-day monetary stabilization bonds. This is the first time the central bank has offered loans directly to non-banking financial entities like brokerages since the 1998 Asian financial crisis.
As we aim to stabilize the corporate bond market, we decided to temporarily offer a system that provides loans to brokerage, providing they have a collateral like high-grade corporate bonds.
The central bank says the move could be considered a safety measure should the pandemic continue to cause havoc. The funds will be available for 3 months, after which the central bank will review the possibility of an extension, depending on the state of the financial market and demand for funds. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
The Seoul Museum of History is offering 90 of its past and present exhibitions for free online. The museum has been closed since February of 24th to promote social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Those interested can check the virtual reality exhibitions on the museum's website. One of them, the Trams of Seoul, shows how trams served as a main form of public transportation in Seoul for almost 70 years in the early 20th century.
Good morning. After 20 straight days of dry weather in Seoul and most other regions, some long-awaited rain is here to bring that to an end. So be sure to have an umbrella with you. It's forecast to rain all day today. Throughout tonight, most regions will see 5 to 40 millimeters of rainfall, while southern coast and parts of Gangwon-do province will see heavier rainfall of between 20 to 60 millimeters. And meanwhile, central inland regions could even see hail with thunder and strong gusts, so be mindful of that. Afternoon temperatures will be nearly 5 to 7 degrees lower than yesterday in most regions. Cool and the mid-teens hovering below season norms this afternoon. So Seoul will get up to 15 degrees Celsius, but Jeju will be at 20 degrees. And Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces could see yellow dust blowing in tonight. Rain is in store again for Sunday afternoon. Then next week, we'll actually see much cooler conditions nationwide. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the globe.
That's all the news we have at this hour. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye.